So Don, if you would begin the recording. Good evening. Welcome to the March monthly meeting for the Finance Committee. I will begin by reading the notice. Meeting agenda, Finance Committee, Monday, March 13th, 2023, 6 p.m. Aldermanic Chambers. Meeting can be viewed on Board of Alders YouTube page. Aldermanic Notice, New Haven. The Finance Committee will hold a public hearing on Monday, March 13th, 2023 at 6 o'clock p.m. in the Aldermanic Chambers, 165 Church Street, New Haven, to act upon the following. 1. LM 2023-0132. Order of the New Haven Board of Alders authorizing the execution of the successor collective bargaining agreement between the City of New Haven and UPSU Local 424, Unit 128, formerly known as CILU Local 71, Blue Collar, dated July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2025. 2. LM 2023-0092. Order authorizing the mayor of the City of New Haven to enter into a one-year contract renewal with Worldwide Travel Staffing Incorporated for nursing services in the amount of $400,000 and to execute, acknowledge, implement, and deliver any and all documents as may be considered necessary or appropriate with respect thereto. Item 3, LM 2023-0120. Order of the Board of Alders of the City of New Haven authorizing the execution of Curriculum Associates LLC agreement with the Board of Education for the period of December 15, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. Item 4, LM 2023-0087. Order of the New Haven Board of Alders authorizing the Board of Education to enter into a 5-year agreement with the State of Connecticut Education Network to provide internet services in the amount of $400,380 before the federal E-rate discount of 90% is applied. Item 5, workshop to receive a briefing from management and budget on the annual budget for fiscal year 2023-2024, starting July 1st, 2023. Item 5, workshop to receive a briefing from the assessor concerning the grand list of the City of New Haven. These items are filed with the city clerk and may be inspected at room 202, 200 Orange Street, New Haven. Per order, the Honorable Adam Marchand, Chair. Attest, Michael Smart, City Clerk. If you need a disability-related accommodation, please call 3 business days in advance at 946-7651 voice or 946-8582 TTY. Members of the public may send comments to public testimony at newhavenct.gov. So we'll proceed now to introductions of colleagues, starting on my right.
Alder Jeanette Morrison, Ward 22.
Richard Furlow, Ward 27.
South Dakota, Ward 18.
Adam Marchand, Ward 25.
Taisha Walker Myers, Ward 23.
We expect other colleagues to arrive soon, but we shall begin right away. Let me just make a couple of quick procedural announcements before we begin. I just want to remind everybody that according to the policy of the Board of Alders, wearing a mask is required in these chambers. We have suitable masks at the table on at my right on this side of the chambers. And so everyone who is here in the chambers is invited and requested and required to wear a mask. The other thing I'd like to say is that we are going to pass over item 2 on the agenda. We received word from the administration that this item is not quite ready for prime time. It will be rescheduled at another date. So this evening we have 3 business items: the UPSU contract, the agreement for the Board of Ed on curriculum associates, and the agreement with the Board of Ed and the internet service provider. Those are the three business items that we have, which we're going to do first, and then we will close the public portion after we hear on all those three items. We'll deliberate and vote, and then we'll proceed after those three items are disposed of to the workshops related to our budget for next fiscal year. So if the maker of item 1 would please come forward. I believe these are, we have a representative from Labor Relations who's going to come forward, and our Director of Management and Budget. As they approach the table, I'd like to recognize our colleague, Holder Emma Festa from their tent, who has joined us. And when you all are properly settled, please give us your names and addresses for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Wendella Batty, 33 Cold Spring Drive, Bloomfield, Connecticut.
Michael Normandy, 45 Jefferson Road, Branford, Connecticut, City Acting Controller.
Thank you. You may proceed.
And we are passing around some handouts for everyone.
We'll just take a moment to do that. Thank you. I see we have two handouts. A blue colored deck and a chart. And so here they come.
Just stop it yourself.
I have the blue one.
Thank you. Thank you.
So as we are getting the final pieces of paper, you'll be sure to tell us which ones to be looking at.
Absolutely. So what we're going to do is really go through the PowerPoint deck, which is the colored document that you have before you. It's really just a short presentation on the 424-128, which is the Parks Unit. Ms. Batty and I will kind of go through just the overall changes within the bargaining unit agreement that were negotiated and agreed upon during negotiations. So starting on slide number 2 is really just a summary of what we're going to go over. This is similar to what you've seen with the nurses contract. It was really a focus in on 3 areas with negotiations with this contract. It was the salary scale, which was revised for recruitment and retention purposes, medical benefit changes, and pension changes. So those are kind of the 3 areas that we're going to focus in on during this presentation with the tentative agreement with the bargaining unit. Going on to slide number 3 is that's just an overview of the bargaining unit. The term, again, as mentioned in the beginning, is from July 1st of 2020 to June 30th of 2025. This bargaining unit has a total of 75 budgeted positions within the bargaining unit between general fund and special funds. So getting into some of the major costs of the agreement on slide number 4, you'll see just sort of what the general GWI looks like within this proposal and GWI's general wage increase, which are salary increases year over year. So in the first year, which is fiscal year 2020-2021, it's a 2% increase using the current salary scale that was implemented at the time of the expiration of the agreement. In fiscal year 2021-2022, we revised the salary scale, which generally had 8 steps in it and 8 ranges, to 2 steps, and really looked at the starting point of salaries for this particular bargaining unit. This bargaining unit really averaged between $50,000 and $60,000. With salary per employees, we did have some around 68 to 69,000 a few, but generally that was the overall consensus prior to the salary changes that we're proposing within this contract. So, and as I mentioned, in fiscal year 21-22, we revised the salary scale, which you'll see in the upcoming slides. And then within the next 3 fiscal years, we use a general wage increase of 3.5% on top of the new salary scale each fiscal year. So what you'll see is in the total base salary, you'll see that it will cost the city $813,369. That's when you compare the base salary, which is the cost of salaries at the time of the expiration of the agreement, which is listed at the top of $3.8 million. Once you get down to fiscal year 2024-2025, you'll see that the total cost of the bargaining unit would be $4.7 million. Obviously, subject to change based on where people are hired, increase in positions over the next fiscal year, so on and so forth. But based on how the bargaining unit is made up now, this is the cost, and you'll see the change over each prior year. There is retroactive wages to this. As you can see, these are estimated costs based on the salary changes that you'll see in the upcoming slides based on the salary scale, but we are looking at about $775,000 in retro cost. And again, that's over a 2.5-year period. So again, that's fiscal year 2021 on 2%, fiscal year 2021-22, utilizing the new salary scale, and then 22-23 is based on when we did this cost up. That was year to date in this current fiscal year, which was about 2 weeks ago. So obviously that cost is going to go up as we move week over week in the current fiscal year. There is an impact on overtime, which was actually in part of the submission that we had. That would actually cost us about $100,000 over the life of the contract. That was not included on this slide, but that was in another cost out that was submitted to the Board of Voters as well. Moving on to slide number 5, this kind of shows the new makeup of the salary scale. Again, as I mentioned, there were 8 ranges with 8 steps. What we really looked at was condensing a lot of those steps, especially on the starting scale for salaries within this bargaining unit. So again, the first scale is fiscal year 2021, which includes that 2% that we talked about. And then fiscal year 22 is when we condense the overall salary scale to just from 8 steps to 2 steps. And we placed each bargaining unit within those 1 and 2 steps based on where they were currently at in the salary scale plus seniority. So we really did use a strategic approach when we looked at placing whether an employee was going in step 1 or step 2 going into fiscal year 22. Moving on to slide number 6 is really just a continuation of the salary scale, which you can see increases year over year by the 3.5%. That was agreed upon within the tentative agreement. Moving on to slide number 7, which talks about employee benefit changes. The next 2 slides will really look at pension changes and medical changes, and I will turn it over to Wendella to talk about these particular slides.
Thank you, Michael. The benefit changes, the pension changes include an early retirement, reduction factor of 5% increase from 2%. This is to assist the city with retention. We also removed we increased the retirement age from 62 to 65. We eliminated what's called the rule of 80 for new hires, so it's no longer available. so that someone has to reach age 65 in order to retire, and if they seek to retire before that, obviously, we're not going to tell them they can't get their retirement, but there is a early retirement penalty. Moving on to the benefits, the medical benefits. As with the nurses, we removed two of the plans that weren't really used. We eliminated 2 plans, we reduced it down to 2 plans. We're offering the PPO and the HSA. The HSA is only available to new hires as of the ratification of this agreement. Those that prefer to stay with the PPO, we have capped the PPO annual premium at 24%. The city is, for the life of contract, the city is contributing 50% of the HSA contribution yearly. It is 10% premium cost share, 10% on the HSA, increased to 11% in 2024 for people between 60 to 80%, $80,000 a year, excuse me. That increase will be 12%, for those making more than 80,000. This bargaining unit does not currently consist of anyone making over 80,000. So most people will be paying in 2024 11% premium cost share. The medical plan is similar to that which we presented to the nurses, and that includes a premium prescription rider that slightly increases what they were currently paying. Co-pays are at $15, $35, $60, and $75. There is a cost relief program if you utilize the PPO. As I said, the HVHP contribution is 50% of the deductible, and that seems to be something that's attractive to this group of employees, although there are those that are still tied to the PPO, and if they wanted to keep the PPO, they can. We're not forcing anybody to change plans. As I said, we've capped the premium at 24%. We have essentially eliminated the workers' comp 13-week top off. This contract also allows us to subcontract work that the city has had a challenging time getting done, either not enough bargaining unit members or the bargaining unit is not quite qualified to do the work. One provision that we have added to our ability to subcontract is that the subcontracting will not cause job layoffs. And so we have the ability to go out and engage contractors if we're not able to get the work done. There is a number of vacant positions within this bargaining unit. We also agreed that the city is going to use its best effort to fill those vacancies. Again, this is a 5-year agreement, 7/1/20 to 6/30/2025. And that's it.
So, along with some of the benefit changes that you have, what we did was Hooker and Holcomb did an analysis on the effects of the pension changes, which was that second document that you received. Just in summary of that second document, the total cost to the pension changes, if we were to look at it from an ADEC perspective in this fiscal year, would be about $77,000 that would have been added to the ADEC based on the pension changes that Ms. Batty laid out. So again, that was the analysis based on Hooker and Holcomb doing the actuarial study for us. So looking at some of the other costs, again, just looking at some of the additional funds that the city would get based on benefits. We would see additional funding based on increased salaries in the OPEB trust. That's still at the 1.25% of the, in the contract. So again, with increased salaries, we would see funding going into that trust. And the pension contribution remains, the pension percentage remains the same. So over the life of the contract, we would see about 240,000 rounded in additional pension contributions from the employees based on their paycheck. So with that, and again, there is a comprehensive, there's a Word document that was submitted as part of the package, also listed, that kind of outlines some of these costs as well that, weren't on the PowerPoint, but we did spell out in this presentation. So with that, Mr. Chair, we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you both for your presentation. And the floor is now open for colleagues who wish to ask questions. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just the last part, do you mind repeating what was that? The pension percentage remains the same, but the, whatever was based on paycheck?
Yeah, so every employee contributes, that's their pension contribution.
No, just the total.
Oh, the total, let me pull that back up, but it's rounded, it's $240,000. So over the life of the contract, that's how much in additional funding we would see from the pension contribution, based on the increased salaries.
Okay. Thanks for that. Should I continue?
If you have additional questions, Alder Festa, please proceed.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. How do we compare with other contracts? I know a challenge with the city is to retain our employees, and what was the overall consensus, I guess, with local 424? Were they mostly in favor of it? What percentages were? What percentage was not? And how do we compare to area towns and cities?
I think that they were definitely in favor of what we proposed as a package. I think their main focus obviously was on healthcare and salaries. And by condensing the steps from 8 to 2, we were able to sort of elevate those people that were at the lower step, which is where they come in. And that, in essence, gets them comparable to other area towns. So we've got 2 steps, and with the GWI at 3.5, we do collapsing the steps, increasing the wages to the point where it's comparable to other towns. They were very happy with that. It was a really tough negotiation. Obviously, they all are, some much more than others. I think that with the pension changes, it's a matter of understanding what the benefits are, and once that's explained to the bargaining unit, I think they understand. Basically, getting the TA, everybody was anxious to get a contract done, and they overwhelmingly, that's the email I got, they overwhelmingly supported the contract once it was done. The TA. I think the wage increases is very favorable.
Okay. And regarding the health care benefits, sorry. When it comes down, so the city contributes 50% to the HSA yearly.
Yes.
And do you know, what are is it laid out the payments like for single, couple, family?
Yes.
What are those costs per month? And then you mentioned the co-pays were 15, 60, 75, did I get those right?
Yes, that's on prescription, yes.
On prescriptions,
Yes.
okay.
What the contribution, the weekly contribution for this bargaining unit would be, for the HSA, would be $24 a week. $28 for a family, so it's either a single or an employee plus one. The contributions on the PPO goes from 79 to 82 for a single and 110 for a family.
And that was per week?
Yes,
Okay, and that's the PPO.
yes.
And what is the deductible usually?
On the HSA, it's a comprehensive plan, so the deductible it's based on usage. When you go to the point of service, you generally don't have a deductible.
Okay. And the PPO, I'm sure has.
On the PPO, that's the PPO.
Oh,
On
that's
the
the PPO.
HSA, the deductible for a single person is essentially $2,000. City contributes half of that. For a family, it's $4,000. The city contributes half of that. The annual deductible.
Okay, I was just gonna ask, yes, yeah.
The annual deductible.
Okay, and city contributes. That's a pretty sweet plan, just,
Well, it depends on where you are and what you're looking for. I mean, there's disagreement all over the place about whether or not the HSA is better, whether PPO is better. What I suggested to people is take a look at what you're paying for a PPO, under PPO plan. And if you think that the deductible is too high, then it's essentially the weekly payment. The weekly deductible is $24 or $26. Compare that to $78 or $100 that you're paying a week. The additional amount of money that you can pay, you can actually put that into your HSA account, which accumulates over time, and you can use it for any healthcare cost that you have. It's your money, nobody's taking it away from you, plus you have a city contribution. There is a maximum amount that your deductible will never exceed in any given year, and it's very easy to build up your account, your health savings account, if you're committed to doing that.
correct. And it does take diligence.
It
But I
takes
can only
diligence.
compare it to private sector. That's why I say it's a sweet deal, because generally private sector is about $6,000 deductible. But I will yield to my colleagues for further questions. Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank Alder Fester. Further questions from colleagues about this ratified successor collective bargaining agreement? Seeing none, I have just a couple. So does the plan, on the medical plan, the high deductible plan is the only plan available to new hires as of the date of the ratification. And there's no way to buy into the PPO plan later on after 3 years or 5 years or some years of service at the city.
Well, I guess at the next contract
They
negotiation.
can bargain for that, but right now that doesn't exist. Okay, thank you. I noticed there were some changes to the pharmacy plan, two of them in particular that I took note. One was the change in the formulary.
Mhm.
And so I'd like to know a little bit about that. And the second one was the addition of a fourth tier
Yes.
in the pharmacy monthly copay. I assume that's for specialty medication?
Those are specialty medications yes, that
That's
is
the highest tier.
the highest tier, the fourth tier.
Yeah.
For cancer treatment and different kinds of high-end drugs.
And then the change in the formulary, the labeling of these things is always a little bit euphemistic. Any wordage that insurance companies use, they sound great, but they may not be great. And so the language that I saw in the packet was going from the national formulary to the essential formulary. And I wondered what that meant.
It simply means that the essential formulary contains drugs that are not readily available over the counter. So if you have a drug that's available over the counter, you don't need it to be as part of the formulary. You can just get it over the counter. Your doctor doesn't need to write a prescription for that.
Mm-hmm.
The essential formula is exactly what the state is using in its state partnership plan. So we thought that would be an option available, that we should make that available to the employees as well. So most of the country, most of the state has moved to the essential formulary. That essentially reduces your having to go to your doctor to get a prescription for an over-the-counter med. So whatever over-the-counter meds are available, you can simply go and get those. It doesn't have to be a part of which is what drives up the cost.
I mean, I could get over-the-counter meds now without a prescription. I just pay for it. So what does that mean exactly? Like the plan will reimburse you for the cost of those over-the-counter meds?
There is an option for reimbursement of costs, but you have to apply for it. It's something that you do at the time of plan choice. It's a prescription reimbursement plan, which it's a special drug management program. And if you're really as diligent as most people should be, part of the purpose of a high deductible is to get the employees to take more responsibility for their health care. So if you apply at the time of application for this specialty drug management plan, some of those prescriptions can essentially be $1, $2, because the drug company will reimburse you for a lot of the prescriptions that you may pay for, which is actually the cost of the prescription is actually added to the deductible is actually added to your annual deductible.
So this is like a manufacturer coupon program?
Yes,
kind of
that's
thing?
exactly what it is. It's
Okay.
a manufacturer
That's
program, kind of program. And it's really a good option, but it tells the employee that, if I really want this, I'm committed to doing it, let me just fill this information out, let me just do this coupon, I send it in, I'll get my money back. The deductible amount is actually added to your annual deductible so that as you get your prescriptions, your deductible is reduced because you may be paying $5 for a prescription or $0 for a prescription, but the deductible is still added to it.
Thank you. Two more questions. Maybe this is for you, Mr. Gormley, but perhaps you can answer too, which is, we know that there's a lot of vacancies in the city right now. Are there a lot of vacancies in this department? And do we think the new pay raise will address that issue?
We definitely think the new pay raise will address the issue because the employees have been complaining for a long time that their pay is so low. And that's why, the union officials are complaining, that's why we can't attract people, that's why employees are leaving for other towns. I think that the way we've structured, we've collapsed the ranges. The average increase is about $6,000–7,000 per scale. I think that making it comparable to other towns means that we won't be losing employees, hopefully, to other municipalities, neighboring municipalities.
Yeah, so currently in this bargaining unit, we have 6 vacancies, but again, I think,
Over 75 posted positions.
Yeah, over 75 budgeted positions, right? So I think one of the things though, as Ms. Batty was talking about is, this would help with recruitment and retention because one of the things that we do see is while we're able to hire, it's a lot of turnover. So again, hopefully with the new salaries scale, it won't be instantaneous, let's put it, out on the table. It won't be instantaneous because we have to post, people have to realize, we have increased salaries. But hopefully it will help with the turnover because when you have to keep constantly training employees, that's also a cost to the city, right? And that's knowledge out the door that's leaving and so on and so forth. So yes, while it's not a lot of vacancies now, I think, hopefully this will certainly help at least in the retention portion of these positions.
Do I recall correctly from the packet that there is an increase in employee contributions to post-employment benefit?
Yes, that was the OPEB. Yes, from 1.25 to 1.5.
Thank you. Finally, you already mentioned before that management won the right to subcontract. Is that an unfettered right, or is there required notice to the union about the need to subcontract? How is that actually structured?
Management always has the right to subcontract, and I'm putting on my old hat from where I came. Management always had the right to subcontract. It's just about the way management went about doing that. And if you've got language in an agreement that says you have the right to subcontract, but it's the impact that could be a grievance, the impact of subcontracting if you're losing bargaining unit positions. So at least we get the parties to agree that management does have the right to subcontract. Let's put it in agreement. Let's not wait till we have to go to Wethersfield to get an arbitrator to say, yes, management has the right to subcontract. my position is, well, I agree with the union, is that management can notify the bargaining union that we intend to subcontract. We don't have to get their permission now, it's just notice.
Mhm.
And if everybody agrees that there aren't sufficient employees to do a certain number of jobs or to do something, then there can be no dispute that the work has to get done, whether it's done on overtime or whether we have to bring in a whole new crew in. At least we don't have to, we don't have to stop what we're doing to get the union's permission in order to do that. We have the right to subcontract. And with that right, we just have to go about doing it the right way.
Is the no layoff clause new?
We've agreed to a no layoff clause, and I think that we aren't generally laying people off. If you're gonna lay people off to subcontract, then there's something wrong with that. So there's a no layoff clause, as long as we use our best efforts, and that was really fought over language, as long as the city uses its best efforts to fill those positions, and the city can demonstrate that it doesn't have sufficient manpower to fill those positions, there is an available workforce to do the work, then we can go out and subcontract. We just have to put the union on notice.
Thank you for your answers to my questions.
You're welcome.
Further questions from committee members on this collective bargaining agreement? Seeing none, don't leave just yet.
Okay.
Would any member of the public wish to come testify on item number 1? Is there a member of the public who wishes to testify on item number 1? And for a third time, is there a member of the public here who wishes to testify on item number 1? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our next item. Thank you very much for your time. The next 2 items pertain to contracts between the Board of Education and outside vendors. As I mentioned before, we're passing over item 2 as it is not ready to go this evening. So item 3 is next. Contract between the Board of Education and Curriculum Associates. Good evening.
Good evening, how are you?
I'm doing well. And once you're settled, please give us your name and address for the record.
Okay. Monica Joyner, 129 Jefferson Avenue, New Haven.
Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
I'm here to present a contract for professional development from Curriculum Associates. Curriculum Associates is the company that we have contracted for our K-5 curriculum. And this contract is for the professional development for our teachers. It's at $157,500, which is why I was told that I need to come here. And what they do is they have leadership consultancies. They go in to all the schools, they observe, they meet with the leadership team, meet with the teachers, give them, help them create a plan for the remainder of the school year. They make sure that our teachers are able to implement the curriculum with fidelity, using the resources, because anytime there's something new, teachers are going to need to learn about that particular resource. So that is the service that they provide. And as the creator of the curriculum itself, they would be the sole source to provide the professional development for that curriculum.
Could you just say a few words about what the curriculum is?
It's this is currently kindergarten through 5th grade. It's mathematics curriculum. It is the digital resource platform. It is all of the digital tools, all of the resources, the text, the slides, the problems, everything that needs to be delivered to the students for their learning. There's also an assessment, a diagnostic that comes with it. So that shows they do a fall diagnostic, winter diagnostic, end of the year. And as an aside, our kids have shown great growth from fall to winter right now, on par with national standards. So we're doing pretty well with it at the moment.
Okay, is that the extent of your presentation?
Yes.
Okay. We will now turn to questions from colleagues about this item. Alder Walker-Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just
Did I hear you say that the entity that created the curriculum is also the entity that will teach the teachers how to use it? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Walker Myers. Alder Furlong.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. Thank you. I'm still not sure what the curriculum does. It's a curriculum. So I'm still not sure what it does. And
It's
so,
all of the standards, based on Connecticut state standards, Connecticut Common Core, all of the standards, all of the learning, all of the tools, everything in terms of what they need to learn from kindergarten, all the different standards, all the different lessons, units, modules, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade. We are actually piloting 6th through 8th grade right now, and potentially gonna purchase this as well for 6th grade and potentially a different one for 7th and 8th graders. But by curriculum, it's everything that our teachers need to teach the students, everything the students need to learn the mathematics that meets the Connecticut Common Core state standards.
and we certainly want our children to have all the tools possible to be able to continue with their education and get the best education possible. What is this curriculum replacing?
I honestly don't know, because I just started in this position in July. The previous supervisor is the one who adopted this curriculum, so I came into it. I don't know what they were using before that. I don't believe they had a specific curriculum. I know they've done things like, there were a bunch of different resources that have been used throughout the years. They were doing, goodness, because mostly I'm a high school person. So in terms of the K-5 stuff, I'm not as familiar with what they were doing at that time. I came into this already. But I know they were doing something called,
And that's fine. I can always request that through the chair. If I may, Mr. Chair, if we can know
yeah, I have to go
if this is an
backwards.
actual replacement of I imagine it must be a replacement of something that's in place. I'm just wondering what, and you may not be able to answer this, just wondering what the leadership is doing. The leadership of the Board of Ed, where it seems like they will be responsible for, I'm just a little confused on what we're doing. So there has to be something in place. And so it would seem that this is a better curriculum, or I'm just not sure of the role of the leadership of the Board of Ed in implementing this curriculum.
So the curriculum itself was purchased 2 years ago. So this is the second year of implementation of this curriculum. What this contract is the professional development for the curriculum. This went through the Board of Ed and was passed on December 12th. So it has already gone through the Board of Ed.
Yep.
It's already been passed. We were engaged in professional development, but then in terms of seeking the sole source letter, I was eventually told that I had to come here in order to get that. So the
Everything
services-
comes here. Yeah.
So, like I said, me being new to the role,
Yeah.
and they said it was like, when it's a certain amount of money, it has to come here. So, okay, then that's fine. But I just wish someone had told me that before,
Yeah.
so that we didn't have to stop the service. So we had to pull back and cancel things that were already scheduled because it now has to go here. But in terms of what the board is doing, prior to me coming on, the curriculum itself was purchased. And so there's a 5-year contract in place for the curriculum itself. And this piece is the professional development for the teachers in order to effectively implement the curriculum.
Okay, so much comes before us. I don't recall that. And so there's so many things coming before us as far as contracts and voting on. So that's a very significant piece of information. Thank you for that. So I guess I would like to know through the chair, what is the success of the curriculum that is now in place? What that success is before we approve implementing the professional standard piece of this. Has it been working?
Absolutely. glasses, I can do it. So.
I have two set of glasses, so I understand.
One free check.
Hold on 1 second. So in terms of, let's see, where's my growth information? So I can bring this to you so you can see it, or I can just talk through it.
Well, actually, well, I'm going to yield back to the chair, that that's the end of my questions. And so if we can have that information, if that'll be easier to get it through you, Mr. Chair, or if it will make sense to hear it now, that I yield back to you.
I think if you can give a quick summary of it now, and then we will follow up with,
Let me find my state presentation, so I just presented for the state.
we'll follow up to get a copy of whatever presentation you can give us. But if there's a brief summary you could provide now, that would be great.
Mostly I remember. So essentially, according to, so iReady does a diagnostic and they're used nationally in several places. If we need our students, because our kids are so far behind, COVID put everybody behind, we need our students to meet at least 50% median growth at this point of the year in order to get 100% growth by the end of the year. Currently, we're at 55% as a district. So we've surpassed that part. There are certain grade levels that are doing quite a bit better than others in terms of their median growth. The stretch growth is what's going to get our kids to kind of catch up like a year and a half. So it's going to be over time that they get caught up. So we've got a percentage of students who have also met their stretch growth. When we talk about tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, tier 1 is on or above grade level. Tier 2 is 1 grade level below, and tier 3 is 2 or more grade levels below. We have moved our students. I mean, as you know, math scores across the district have not been good for years. So starting off the year, we started with 5% of our students that were at or above grade level. We're currently at 12% at or above grade level. So we've moved them from tiers 3 and 2 into tier 1. The tier 3 went from 57% who were 2 or more grade levels below to now 40%. So that's a huge increase, moving them from one grade band to the next. And our tier 2, which is that middle band, moved from 40% to 48%. So they moved up. Those kids from 3 grade levels below have moved up into either 1 grade level below or on or above. So our kids are moving, they're showing growth. There's so many different things that I'd have to get through in this, but that's essentially, that's the growth. So they've been showing growth from the beginning of the year to now. And with all of the other things that we've been implementing as a district and as the math department with our coaches to help the students and to help parents, teachers have been reflecting how much more comfortable they are and how much more comfortable the kids are getting with the instruction because of the things that we're putting in place to kind of front load some information so that a lot of us know that math is difficult for young people. The younger they are, and sometimes even for teachers, because they have to teach everything, and math is that thing that people are often phobic about. But because of some of the things we've put in place, like morning meetings and calendars that are based on this particular information, by the time we put things in place in September, so that when they get to them in October, they've had some practice with it every single day. So when it's time for the instruction, they have a bit more of a foundation, so they're able to move faster. So that's the type of thing that has been going and using these resources. And we just had a meeting, is today Monday? It was today. Just had a meeting today with, there's a company called Learn Platform that shows the impact of a particular tool, the usage and the impact. So what they've shown is that it's statistically sound that the usage, using this, the more our students use it, the better their outcomes have been. And the only grade that has not shown that statistical correlation between the amount of use and the impact is 2nd grade. And that's something that we have to explore. We just found that out. And what we have found is that when we looked at another data point, second grade wasn't using it as much. So that's why part of that thing has happened. So we've got all these different tools now to kind of look at and assess the actual impact of the curriculum and the MyPath and the practice tools on the outcomes for our students.
And before you follow up, let me just acknowledge our colleague Alder Hamilton, who has joined us.
Good evening, everyone.
Just one final question. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me. So we are seeing an improvement then in math and reading.
I can't say reading because I'm math.
Okay. We are seeing an improvement in math
Yes.
for the exception of second grade.
They're improving, but the correlation between the impact, I think, how did they explain it exactly? Second grade has the lowest.
Oh, okay. And then you believe this is and the increase is due to this curriculum that's been in place?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Alder Farrell. I have Alder Festa on the queue and then Alder Morrison. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, most of my questions were actually answered, but I'm a little confused in regard to this curriculum has been in use for 2 years.
The first year was, I believe, a pilot year, and this is like the year that it's fully implemented.
Okay, so from, let's say, September until present, and we'll be continuing until the end of the year.
And beyond, yes.
Second grade is the grade that is struggling with this curriculum. I guess what I don't understand is, you mentioned it's not being used as much.
So there are certain aspects of it. For example, there's a piece called MyPath, which is part of it, and that's the practice tool for kids to get on with that's more structured and independent and specific to them. So MyPath diagnoses where they need the most assistance, and it gives them, it's kind of like a smart type thing. It adjusts and adapts to what the kids need and gives them the instruction, gives them the different pieces that they need. Apparently this is what we're guessing. Like I said, we just got this information this morning, so we haven't had a time to dive deep into it. But the fact that there's less of an impact apparently at second grade, it appears that second grade teachers are not necessarily using it as much as their counterparts in third grade and fourth grade, in terms of using the MyPath piece. Not the curriculum itself, but just that piece of it. So that's the part where we're not seeing as much growth as we could, but once we share this data with the teachers, with the coaches, and with the administrators, and they see the actual impact, then I anticipate that those teachers are gonna be like, oh, well, I need to get on this because they're seeing the impact everywhere else.
And this is second grade across the board.
Yes.
Are they like texting each other? Saying, are you?
So no, it's one of those things where
It's just interesting that it's second grade and it's across the board.
and just like also third grade across the board is showing the best growth.
Yeah.
So one of the things we're doing now is that we're doing collaborative walkthroughs with our coaches. In fact, I had 2 today. We're going to different schools with teams of coaches and looking at classrooms, trying to see what the trends are across the city so that we can replicate the things that are going well. And the things that are not going as well, we get more minds on it, looking at that, saying, hey, we saw something over here that's going great, maybe you should try that, and that would elevate that piece, so that we're sharing information and not just staying in particular schools, particular schools that are doing well and then some not, doing not as well.
Okay. And this information is new, you said, you just got this information about second
Just
grade.
this morning.
So it still needs to be shared.
Yes.
And you will sit, I'm assuming, with the second grade teachers to say,
Absolutely.
you know, and find out why they're not using it if it has a success rate.
So it's not that they're not using it, or they're just not, we have to figure out what it is exactly. And there are probably some schools where second grade are doing great, and then there's just others, but when you get it kind of all to the middle, and you look at that median piece and that average, then that's where the second grade is the lowest of the rest of it.
And this MyPath, is that what it's called?
Mhm.
Is this something the kids can do at home, or is this in classroom?
Both.
Both. So the kids can sign on and use it at home
Yes.
as well as a guide?
Yes.
Okay. I only say that because I think my kids used to do some kind of online stuff, but.
There's so many different tools.
Yeah. And then just my last question is, so this what we're voting on is for professional development.
Yes.
And do you think that has anything to do even with the second grade? Because you would think professional development would come before the actual usage of the curriculum. And so the teachers have been teaching something that they've had little training on, or is it something that they've had? Look, I think you get the gist of my question.
And you know what, you just made me think of something. There are a number of schools that have new teachers at second grade also. So the PD started like last year with the first year of implementation, and there was professional development going on then. So that was kind of just getting your feet wet, kind of getting a little bit of traction. The more teachers are immersed in it and are getting that targeted professional development, the better they're getting at it and the better progress we're seeing with students as well.
Okay, so the teachers have gotten, even the new ones, some professional development. It's just the newer ones are a little, let's say, behind.
Yep.
And this will help build on that curriculum to assist them in teaching the kids.
My plan ultimately is to be able to differentiate the PD that we have so that those people who are brand new to it get what they need, the people who are intermediate get what they need, the people who are advanced get what they need, and then the advanced people can then start to turn key, mentor and help the kids, not kids, but the teachers, to bring them up as well. So that's the ultimate plan, but right now it's just we need to get everybody, and there's so much movement. Like people may move within a particular school, they may have taught fourth grade last year and are teaching second grade this year. So that's something that may cause a difference. We have, in some places, people that are brand new to the school period, and then we also have vacancies in places as well. So all of those different things contribute.
And I'm sorry, I just thought of one more. It deals with homework. I just remember Singapore math. Is that what it was?
Singapore math is something that they did at some point, yes.
Yes, they did. And I had to send notes saying I cannot do first grade math. So I could not help my child who was really stressed with that. So how are we helping parents help their kids with, because all these new curriculum, it's not like the long division anymore, how I was taught. So you don't want to confuse your kids. But how do you get that result using this curriculum and the parents? It's almost like the parents need to go back to school too. At least that's how I felt.
So one,
Perhaps
Because they,
another-
or we
I'll
could
say
get
I got
an
to have-
answer through you, Mr.
Well, I
Chair.
just
we can
think
have a
that-
whole bunch of conversation about some of the different things that, in place for parents. So we've got newsletters that are going home that specifically have ways that parents can help their kids at home. I'm meeting at a school tomorrow to meet with parents and talk to them about ways they can help their students at home. I've got some plans in the works. I've met with some people in beauty salons and barbershops to talk about how we can get things in place in those spaces where kids are for them to like learn by play and different types of things, and signage with QR codes that have access to different links for things that parents can get involved in. So I mean, there's a lot of just the 8 mathematical standards, breaking them down into how you can do things with your children from 2 years old on that help them develop those standards so that you're helping them develop mathematical minds without doing long division and those different types of things that parents kind of get anxious about. So,
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thanks for answering my question.
We appreciate the broader context, which helps us to make a good decision about this particular item. We'll move to Oliver Morrison now.
All that my question was answered.
Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none, let me just hold you for one moment. Would any member of the public wish to come and testify on this item? Is there a member of the public here tonight who wishes to testify on this item? And for a third time, anyone here wishing to testify on this item, please stand up and come forward. Seeing none, we thank you for your time. And after the next item, we'll deliberate on this item.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So that was item 3. We passed over item 2. We now move to item 4, which is the contract with the State of Connecticut Education Network to provide internet services. And thank you very much, sir. So when you're settled, please give us your name and address for the record, please, and then you may begin.
Good evening. My name is Gildemar Herrera, 722 Second Avenue, West Haven, Connecticut. Good evening. I'm here in representation of the New England Board of Education. We are trying to go into a contract with Connecticut Education Network. We are looking to get 2 gig. If you look at the contract, let me go through it very quickly. So the total of the contract before the E-rate is $400,000, $380. With the E-rate is $40,000, $38, $38, and this is to the duration of the 5 years. We have gone out to bid. If you look in item number through the contract negotiation here, item number 2. We went out, we have an E-rate form at 470, and we have the number there. We also have a letter to intent to provide CEN pending approval of this board. This is to provide a 10 gig out of 54 Meadow and also out of Blatchford, which is Fame. We are in the midst of creating this next coming year. We're going to create a server room there for redundancy. That way the district will have dual service server rooms, and that will allow us to load balance and balance the district. So if it goes down at any time at 54 Meadow Street, or if we decide to move, we have the services in place to move and be able to put our services, and we'll never be down, let's say. There will be no downtime. So we are looking to go into contract with CEN. This contract will actually save us money. Currently, we were paying at $150 per connection. Now this will go down to $575 per connection. This will save the district about $7,002 per year, $35,010 for the duration of the 5 years. And the services also provide the IP addresses that the district uses for the schools. This provides services for all 44 locations throughout the district. And this is for a 5-year contract. So we'll start July 1st, 2023. It'll end June 30th, 2028. And do you have any questions for me?
Thank you for your presentation. Questions from committee members on this item? Alder Festa.
Have we been using this already, or it's still pending approval of this board?
It has been a yearly contract with the state. Every year I go to F&O. Every year I get approval, and we've been using them yearly. Last year, we went through all the accounts. We were able to bring the accounts, I believe we were paying about $1,000, no, $850. We brought it down to $750 for an agreement. Going forward, though, I would like to save the district additional money and with this 5-year contract. So we have been using them on a yearly basis, but we would like to extend it to a 5-year contract.
Okay, thank you. I was going to ask about reliability, but I think we already know since we've been using them.
Yes,
Okay.
We have been for years.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Further questions from colleagues on this item? Alder Hamilton.
Thank you. Good evening, ma'am. So, the rate will be the same fixed rate for the 5-year period of the contract, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you said there will be a savings to the.
Yes, per connection. It used to be $750. Now it's only $575 per connection.
Okay, and how many connections do you expect will happen?
Well, it's 2 locations.
Oh, right.
It's 2 locations, 44 sites that it supports.
Okay, so that means, all right, 2 locations, 44 sites.
Yeah.
So you expect at least 44 connections? 88?
The purchase is for the 2 connections. So one is at 54 Meadow, it's a 10 gig ring.
Okay.
What it does is it's, let's think of it as a hub.
Okay.
So in this hub, all these little arms go out and grab on and give us internet throughout the district. So what this does is it allows for 54 Meadow to have that 10 gig connection. Then we'll put that 10 gig connection on Blackstreet with Fame. And then what we're going to do is we're gonna load balance. So what we're gonna do is take some of those connections, bring them to 54, some of those connections will go to Blackstreet. And then if in the future we ever decide to move, we will take those connections, bring them into Fame, then we're up, right? And then we'll move that equipment over to the new location, then we go balance again.
And you think it's a good plan for us? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alder Hamilton. Further questions from colleagues on this item? Alder Furlong.
Thank you, Ms. Oh, actually, I see the answer. Never mind.
Further questions or almost questions from colleagues? I have a couple questions. Is the city, the Board of Ed, using a fiber optic network, or is it copper cables that are connected?
No, it's fiber optic. We're actually in the midst of updating. We have gotten multiple grants. We have updated all of the wire through the schools. So we're actually using fiber optics, and this is fiber optic.
So if I understand it then, there's a server or a mega server at Meadow Street, and then also a redundant server at Fame. And wires come forth from those servers, or those hubs, and go to the various schools where they have multiple terminals probably for staff and students. And what this contract pays for is not the hardware, it's the actual internet service.
Correct.
Okay, so all of all the kind of other IT infrastructure like fiber optic cables and terminals and routers and modems, those are already there, or do those things come with this contract as well?
Half correct.
Half correct.
So 54 Meadow
Mhm.
has all those things in place already.
Uh-huh.
We need to put this in place because we are building a secondary server at Fame.
For redundancy,
Yes.
which is smart.
So we need to have this in place because we need the wires and everything to be run through. So this will provide everything. They'll come in, they'll set up for us, we'll provide the server and the switches. So that's what's gonna happen. This is the service itself. But we are trying to get in additional information. We actually have another contract where we bought the switches, we have the routers. This is all part of a big plan. And we're looking to implement this so we will be able to have connectivity. So when we do these things and we have all these my grand plan for the summer. So we're gonna start working on it. And then the next year, capital funding, we're gonna utilize that funding. We hope to utilize that funding to take in the rest of the equipment that we need. So we would have the redundant server inside of the thing. So this is the first step that we need because this is gonna take time. This isn't just a switch. This is wiring, running things, and we need to do it all in a sequence. So this is the first step of that project.
And the Connecticut Educational Network is a state consortium that gives local municipalities and library systems the opportunity to benefit from a centralized purchasing power. And so the rate is significantly lower than if the city were to try to directly bargain with a private entity for this.
Absolutely. And also, in some of this, if you look, and I'm sure you were provided, I'm hoping, the dual connectivity, right? So east-west connectivity in Meadow Street, it will manage the routers, ability to burst line speeds, cloud connectivity, ultra low, tendency, dedicate bandwidth, IP sub-addresses, because this is another thing. So the district has IP addresses. So these are also included in here. So all the IP addresses that districts use, we're paying for them, and they're only $128 per month for all of the IP addresses range that we purchased. So it also does the firewall. This is all included. The filtering, it does the protection, the fiber filtering, the firewalls included. So there is a package that comes with those things, because internet comes in and out, so we need security for the students, for the staff, for us to be able to do this. You know, and you're right, they have monitoring. So another thing that comes with it is monitoring. So if we're down, someone lets us know, we're down. You know, so these are things, and there is, oh, and my favorite, no data caps or charge for overages. So if I use too much of something and somebody never knows to turn off their internet, you know what? I'm okay, it's all included. So my favorite part of that. So, and those are the things that we're looking at. We're looking to make sure that we have a redundancy in the district, because we need to be able to load balance our data. We need to be able to do this without any downtime. We're trying to have no downtime.
Thank you very much. Further questions from colleagues about this item? Seeing none, would a member of the public wish to come and testify on this item? Is there a member of the public here who wish to come and testify on this item? And for a third time, if you wish to come testify, now's the time to do it. Please come forward. Seeing none,
Mr. Chair,
Alder DeCall.
I move to close the public section. Second.
The motion is made to close the public portion and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The public portion of this meeting is closed. You may sit down, and we thank you so much for your presentation. All right, so this is the portion of the meeting where we deliberate on our business items. Alder DeCola.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move a favorable recommendation on item 1. Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion on item 1? Alder Walker-Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think.
And if we could use the microphone so that our staff can hear.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a good agreement. I've actually been hearing from a lot of employees that were in parks from the beginning of this negotiation with the city, and looking forward to what they ultimately agreed on. So I am in full support of this contract. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Walker-Martin. Further discussion on item number 1. I will just note for the record that often these contracts, we leave in committee and then I ask for them to be discharged. However, the calendar on this item, it must be voted on before April 8th. We have 2 board meetings between now and April 8th. And so going the usual path is fine for this item. There's no need to expedite it beyond the usual first and second reading process. Discussions on the item. Seeing none, all in favor of a favorable recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The item will be given a favorable recommendation. Alder DeCola.
Mr. Chair, seeing that we're passing over to, I move to item 3, and I move that as a favorable recommendation. Second.
Item's been moved and seconded. Item number 3, discussion. Curriculum Associates, math. Yes, Alder Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am in support of this item. I think that it's very important that as an educational system, we use every tool we can get. I couldn't quite understand initially how you have a service, one service to that for the kids, and then later on you have to come back to get the service for the teachers to be able to teach the kids. But I'm glad that everything is catching up with one another now, so we can really see some type of improvement with our kids and their math. Just as we've been talking a lot about the reading scores of our kids and the different things that we're trying to put in place to help that, I'm glad to see that this is yet another service that will help with our math scores, because reading and math, they all correlate. And so to be able to see this and be able to hear the testimony tonight, that this actual curriculum is helping our most impacted kids or second graders, really makes me feel good that we're going in the right direction with our filling up our tool belt. So I am in support of this item.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Further discussion on item number 3. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with my colleague on everything that she just mentioned. I just want to add that I look forward to numbers in the future. It seems as if improvements have already been made in the short period, well, over the pilot, as well as this past year to this present time. I look forward to seeing what the numbers are at the end of the year, as well as in the future, because it's important as far as what, goals are for our students who are already struggling with math and reading, and this is one step closer to us being better informed to how our students are performing out there and what the mayor has proposed as well with after school stuff, et cetera. So I know you're not the chair of education, but I hope to see additional information coming from the Board of Ed regarding our kids' curriculum and numbers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Further discussion, Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with everything that's been said so far. We're voting to approve the purchase of this curriculum. The numbers are important. We've heard that math and reading scores are down, but now we're hearing that math and reading scores are up. And so these reports should come before us so that we can make sense out of what we're purchasing or allowing to be purchased. And so I'm looking forward to the information that we requested through you, and hopefully we'll get that before the second reading. I didn't say I do support this reluctantly because I'm not convinced all of what's going on. And so when we get the report, then I'll be better able to make a more solid decision on whether this is actually working. And based on, because we heard that scores are down, but tonight we heard that scores are up. And so I just need more clarification on exactly what we're doing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Furlow. Further discussion on this item? I'll just note for the record that I will indeed work with our legislative fiscal analyst, Don Hayden, to follow up on the question that you asked, Alder Furlow. I will also take the initiative to reach out to Alder Saban, the chair of the Education Committee, because I think there's probably an update on the curriculum that is bigger in scope than just the information request on this item. We should get that information request fulfilled, but I think there's a broader follow-up that should be done as well, and perhaps that committee is the right place to do it. Further comments on item 3? Seeing none, all in favor of a favorable recommendation to the full board, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. We will go forward with a favorable recommendation. Alder Nicola.
Mr. Chair, I move favorable recommendation for item 4. Second.
Item 4 has been moved and seconded. Discussion on item 4. Alder Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am in support of this item. Trying to help our system be the best that it can be and to constantly improve itself and to be able to see that we're going to be able to save some money. It's very helpful. And the last part of the testimony, when she talked about overage and doing extra stuff and not getting penalized, that's right up my alley because I'm constantly doing stuff extra, and to know that we're not boxed in. I think that this is really a good agreement, and it's not just as one year. It's a solid 5 years. They can work with the system and build the system to be what it needs to be to help our kids. So I am in support of this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Further discussion, Alder Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair Marchand. I'm also in support of the item for the connectivity for our city, the Board of Education and the other areas. It's going to be a good fit The contract is gonna help us to save money. And the network up and running, and as she said, building onto a bigger, broader connection network for our city and the Board of Education. I think it's a wonderful thing, and I'm in support of the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Hamilton. Further discussion on the item? I'll just say that we haven't heard about this particular implementation of the CEN because it was yearly contracts that didn't come before us. But if you recall, colleagues, presentations from our now deceased city librarian, John Jessen, about the library making use of this very network to get internet services at a much better rate with better services. And so we've heard a related item before, never in regards to the board vet, but in regards to the library system. And we supported that then, and I think we should support it here for this proposed 5-year contract. Further comments? Seeing none, all in favor of a favorable recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The item will move forward with a favorable recommendation. And before we proceed with our workshop, the public portion of the meeting is closed. That means there's no more public testimony. But the meeting will continue, and the public is welcome to stay. And that's going to be a budget workshop featuring our Director of Management Budget and our assessor. But we are going to take 5 minutes. And when we come back in 5 minutes, we'll proceed with those workshops. Thank you.
Jesus, I'm not that slim.
Because other municipalities maybe thinking, well, geez, like, businesses and mitigate, the impact of the residents, or do I, and put it on the children, or do I just? Yeah, I mean, that's not a choice any mayor has. Yeah. 37 years, right? Good to see you. Good night. Yeah, I'm not ready.
Hey, how you doing? I'm good.
Hey, what's up?
I'm good.
I owe you some stuff.
Now I get it next week, boy.
Next week?
Not this week, no. What about,
Your finance meeting is next week, but I have a town hall with the mayor.
and no, not next week. Our next,
Oh, the next board meeting, well, no, George wanted it first.
which meeting?
I'm talking about budget stuff.
Okay, right. But I'm talking about a 5-year contract. We,
I gave that to Barbara.
she got it already?
Barbara, you have the lead contract, right?
Did you all submit it
I
for?
submitted it, I wrote it, I submitted it.
Oh,
It
okay.
should be communicated at the next board.
Yeah, that's what I want.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we-
I need that other
I
stuff
got it.
too.
Yeah, I gave it to Barbara.
But in my mind, you know, I'll be, we're still working on the phone thing, I see.
Yeah,
I don't know why there seems to be,
so there's some installation stuff because it's a new building, Giovanni doesn't want certain type of installation in there and then the contractor on back and forth. That's all we gotta work on. I approved the quotes and everything else, but it's the installation portion that Giovanni is working on.
yeah, you probably don't want nothing.
At police facilities,
No, yeah, that's sometimes.
I don't have leave.
Huh?
I don't have leave.
All right.
He sent me police facility management and he sent me Worcester Square improvements.
Oh, see, I'm glad I saw that today.
Because I even did a search real quick in the email. Because I got your crack notice, I got a PowerPoint finance, I have the note of program staffing. Have you seen, I have used the Microsoft EA agreement.
Just let us see those.
Let's make it short, not crazy. I'm very well could be crazy. Send me the one piece you have there in the folder, and then the rest of them.
Well, I can't go by here, I can't fit.
Oh, I didn't. I'm just very relaxed.
Good evening, everybody. We are going to resume our meeting. And so we have dispensed with our business items this evening and closed the public portion. But members of the public are indeed welcome to stay and listen to what will be, no doubt, a riveting discussion between the city staff and this committee in regards to the mayor's proposed budget for fiscal year 2023-2024. And I believe, Mr. Gormany, that the time is now for you to come forward and to give us your presentation. And I believe Mr. Gormany will indicate when it's time for Mr. Pullen to come forward, because I think his presentation is embedded in yours. Is that correct? Correct. So we'll do number 5 and 6 kind of together. We've got, no doubt, an updated version of the deck, which was sent to colleagues on Saturday. And we'll just give it a moment to get all the paper handed out.
All right, Michael Gormany, 45 Jefferson Road, Brantford, Connecticut. All right, just making sure everybody gets a copy.
I also would like to remind colleagues that we have a schedule of departmental workshops, which we'll review before we end tonight. And so those very detailed questions that you have for department heads and coordinators will be then and not now. So save your deep dives on departments for when those coordinators and department heads are here, but certainly questions in regards to the major pieces of the moving pieces of the budget are appropriate this evening. Mr. Gordon.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a thick packet. We are obviously not going through all of this because there are charts and graphs and things like that in this packet. So we'll be going through the relevant slides, and again, as the chair mentioned, I will take some questions, but as he mentioned, you have department workshops coming up, so any questions I can't answer will be referred to when that department comes before you with myself. Moving on to slide number 2 is really just some of the budget goals that we set during this process, which was the review of the mill rate, recruitment and retention, which you've heard during these union negotiation contracts, but also incorporated in the budget. Looking at inflation was a big part of our budgets, our fixed costs, which is how we really start the budget process and looking at those fixed costs. Looking at how we can maximize efficiencies and resources, maximizing our ARPA funds, and looking at, what the Board of Education needs on their side as well. This is also a big part of our budget. Even though they are funded by the state through ECS, there's a city contribution that also must be accounted for as well. So looking at the needs of education as part of this process is very important. Going through slide number 3 kind of just outlines the budget schedule that management and budget utilizes. We normally start the process in October, which in a capital year normally begins with the capital budget. That takes a little longer when you're planning out project costs for infrastructure projects, IT, so on and so forth. But then usually about a month later, we begin the general fund process, which departments get us their budget packages back in normally December, which then you can see what we do with those numbers. We analyze, we look at revenue, we look at our fixed costs through expenditures, debt service, personnel costs, so on and so forth. Our grants are normally due in January. Those run on sort of a different schedule depending on the grant and approval. In February, the Capital Projects Committee will approve the capital budget in a capital year that is set by charter, that it must be done by the 15th of February. And then on March 1st is the mayor's budget submission, and then from March to June are the workshops and the approval of the overall budget. So moving on to the next slide. This just kind of gives a historical sense of what's happened from a net operating standpoint with the city since fiscal year 13 through fiscal year 22, which is still being audited. And then it shows our fund balance, which is currently at $36.9 million, which is about almost 6% of the operating budget. As you can see over the years, we've certainly added to that fund balance through operating surpluses the last few years. So again, this slide is just kind of a historical representation of where we've been since fiscal year 2013 and also looking at the city's fund balance. Again, the government, GFOA, the Government Finance Officer Association, recommends normally about 2 to 3 months of operating expenses as a proper fund balance. From a percentage standpoint, that's about 16% of your budget. So again, we're at 6%, but certainly making progress through policies that the administration works with this board and the full board on and setting budgets. Moving on to slide number 5. This just gives you a sense of the mayor's proposed budget for fiscal year 24. The budget on the general fund side increases by $29.5 million, which is 4.66% when you compare it to fiscal year 23. Again, one important point is that, like everyone else, the city has fixed costs. That 4.66% is actually less than inflation that you're seeing, that we've been seeing going on. So that was one of the very important budget goals that we set in that first slide, was looking at inflation and how we can minimize the budgetary increase. This is a capital year, so what you see on this slide is $55 million is what we're bonding for capital. We set a goal a few years ago in the prior administration of looking at the cap and continuing this goal as well. As far as how much we borrow, we did set the limit at 60 million, which we continued the last 4 to 5 years when we set that goal. This year we're looking at 55 million. And you'll see that we are utilizing ARPA funds as part of the capital budget as well, which I'll get into. So moving on to slide number 7, which it looks like the title slide. Yep, slide 7. This just kind of gives an overview of the capital improvement plan, what it is, which capital is used for the city's infrastructure and assets, land, building, rolling stock, investment in neighborhood development, things like that. That's what makes up the capital budget. As part of the appropriating ordinances, you get the bonding, which includes 5-year, 10-year, 20-year, 30-year bonds, any redesignation from previous projects, tax anticipation notes, so on and so forth. Moving on to slide number 8 is really just an overview of the capital budget, and it's really a continuation of a lot of projects that this board has seen in the past. So really continuing the investment in IT, rolling stock, parking meters, and neighborhood improvements, trees and sidewalks. The one new project in here, which is under our engineering department, is the expansion of Longworth Park, which is a mixture of our capital and then state grants, state grants and city ARPA funding as well. So again, that's really the one new project. From the state grant side, we moved LoSiP under finance because they have expanded the uses of LoSiP. In the past, that has been utilized for pavement management, which is still the plan. Let me be clear, that's still a plan for most of that funding to still be used for pavement management. But LoSiP has also, the state of Connecticut has also expanded some of the guidelines. So we're looking at some of those guidelines and some of that expanded use, which would include IT, plowing, and a few other metrics that was outlined in the capital budget. Moving on to slide number 9 is really just a chart that shows a continuation of the city's use of capital funding and the actual borrowing. In 2020 is when we started the 2-year cycle. There was a one-time project in 2020, which is why it was at 70.7 million. But as you can see, we've really stuck to that plan of borrowing over the last few years of 60 million. So moving on to slide number 10. This is the ARPA funding that we were talking about. So what the city is looking at utilizing ARPA funds for is 6.3 million of ARPA funding. Now, we are not asking the board to take it off of the current balance that is in ARPA. What we did was we looked at previously approved plans, and we are actually reallocating some of that funding to supplement the capital budget in fiscal year 2023-2024. So what we outlined here were those projects that we are reallocating the funding from, which we work with the departments on. The biggest project is administration, which was approved as part of the summer reset. This is when we were facing a significant gap, and this board, working with the administration to our credit, approved $20 million as revenue loss and revenue replacement. We didn't end up needing all that funding during those years. So we did have a balance of $6.7 million left over from that particular line item, and we are reallocating that to the projects that you see below. We did check with our ARPA consultants as we were doing this, and these are all eligible projects under the American Rescue Plan. Excuse me. Now, one other thing related to ARPA is we did, as part of the last allocation that was approved, the last large allocation, we did say about reporting to the board related to ARPA funding and doing a deep dive on projects. We did look at scheduling that as part of this process. The tentative date is May 8th to kind of give this board an overview of where we are with the ARPA funding, what we've been doing, some of the progress is being made with that funding. But again, what the capital budget does do is reallocate some of the funding to lower our borrowing costs for eligible projects for fiscal year 23-24. I'm actually going to skip to slide number 13, which really just gives, and again, slide number 13 really just gives the ARPA allocation. This is the same thing that we publish in a monthly financial report on a monthly basis. So these are just the project categories that have been approved and the balances. Again, a good portion of this was just approved in August of 2022, which was the 53 million. So again, a lot of these projects are in the beginning stages and being worked on by the departments. And you'll get an updated analysis in May. So what we're going to go into is the general fund revenue. So looking at slide 15 is the normal pie chart that we kind of show where the revenue is coming from. So as you can see, for 2023, 2024, a large portion of our revenue actually comes from property taxes. That's 49% of the overall city's revenue. So we talked for, the last number of years, a lot of the city's revenue is really derived from two places. State grants and property taxes make up a majority of the city's revenue. So this pie chart just outlines where the revenue is coming from, which shows that majority of state pilot payments, state education aid, and property taxes. The next slide, slide number 16, kind of just gives you an outline of where we've been for the last few years from a budgetary standpoint and mill rate. So as you can see, the mill rate for fiscal year 2023-2024 is going from 39.75 to 37.20, which is a 6.42% reduction in the mill rate. And as I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, we are going, the budget increased by 4.66%, which is currently less than the inflationary rate. So that was very important that we kind of stuck to as much of a percentage increase or budgetary increase as possible. We really did look in this budget at limiting that increase as we looked at comparing revenues and expenses. The next slide kind of just gives a brief overview of our revenue changes. And I did forget to mention in the beginning, the PDF copy of this will also be posted to the OMB website as well. So, again, looking at the revenue, a lot of our revenue going into 2023-24 was tax revenue that increased. This was based on the phase-in plus the percentage growth in the grand list, which you'll hear about from Mr. Poland. But we are looking at an increased revenues of 25.6 million for taxes. We did see a slight decrease in some of our state aid. We did see a reduction in the pilot payment. And this is based on the OPM calculation, which is derived from the mill rate and your grand list. There's some other calculations that go into that, but with the phase-in, we did see a slight reduction in the calculations from the state. And we did see, I'm sorry, let me get some more place here. We did look at building permits, and working with the building official, we did keep that budget remaining the same at $15 million going in from fiscal year 23 to 24. And we did look at traffic and parking meters revenue as well as keeping that as status quo. We did look at the sale of fixed assets, and that budget did increase from 2.5 million to 3.1 million going into fiscal year 23-24 as well. We did look at also keeping in the ARPA funding and rolling that over from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 24. Right now, with all the projections that we see on the revenue side in this current fiscal year, we are actually not projecting to use the ARPA funding that was built into this budgetary cycle. So we did look at, moving that over into next into fiscal year 23-24. Based on CPI and the increase in the fire services budget, we do see a slight increase of about $1 million, a little bit over $1 million in the Yale fire service and voluntary payment going into next fiscal year as well. So going through the deck, the next 7 slides are really just the normal charts and graphs that you see, which compare the mill rate, tax collection percentage, building permits, and other revenue. So I am going to ask that we go to slide number 27, and if I can have Mr. Foley come up to the table, that is where our grand list comes in.
Thank you, Mr. Gormley. And Mr. Fulham, when you are seated, please give us your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Alex Pullen, 6 Pequot Avenue, North Haven, Connecticut, acting city assessor. Good evening, board. President.
Good evening.
The total grand list for the 2022 grand list year, which would be fiscal year 23-24, is approximately 19 billion. The net taxable grand list is approximately 9 billion, which is an increase of 175 million or 1.97% when compared to grand list 2021. Real property, when stratifying the data, real property is up 0.09%, so almost 1%. Motor vehicles up 11.87%, and personal property is up 5.39%. Residential property of this entire universe of real property, residential property is down 0.19%. Commercial is up 0.74%. Now this is commercial excluding apartments, which are viewed as sort of their own entity. And apartments are up 7.17%. While industrial is down 2.04%. The exempt grand list, not to be confused with personal exemptions on the taxable grand list, but when we say exempt grand list, we mean churches, Yale, things of that nature, is up 62 million, almost 63 million, or 0.64%. And of that 9.9 billion non-taxable grand list, you can see from the slide that the largest contributors are Yale University at 4.3 billion, Yale New Haven Hospital 1.3, municipal city at 2.4 billion, and the state at about 1 billion. Moving on to the next slide, what you can see is data from the Office of Policy and Management, which basically compares our grand list in New Haven to some of the other larger cities. And what you can see is as of grand list 2020, which at that time, the exempt grand list was even smaller than it is now. We were over double pretty much everyone else. You see our 8.5 billion as compared to the next largest being Hartford at 4.1. The next slide that we have just compares the grand lists over the years. You see we're starting with grand list 2017 and it goes all the way up into grand list 2022. Basically everything that I explained on the first slide, this is just the breakdown of that. If you were to look at real estate versus personal property versus motor vehicle, and you would see that 9.8, what that 9.8 billion is made up of. The second line that you would see in the middle, these are the personal exemptions that would be on the grand list, which is where we go from the gross, subtract these exemptions, and we see the net taxable grand list at the bottom of almost 9.1 billion, 9,074,490. Our next slide, average tax change. Now, typically, the assessors don't talk about taxes because it's a whole different department that does that. But in this case, where we are just coming off of a phase-in, it's important for taxpayers and for the board to see what happens even as the mill rate is going down, but exemptions are coming off, so tax bills are changing. What you can see is if you look at the average taxes for a one family for the 2021 grand list, which would have been last July and this coming January were those payments. The average taxes for a one family are about $6,900, $6,950. For the 2022 grand list, so this summer coming up and the January afterwards, it would be up from 69 to about 74, 54, almost 7,500. And of course, these are all averages and medians, so there's going to be fluctuation. Two families, you can just look at the chart and see that two families are up, three families are up, and four families are up as well. The average changes would be in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th column, and you would see that the one families have the smallest percent change, while the largest would be the two families. If you prefer to look at the median as opposed to the mean, that would be the next column over. But what most people want to see is the brass tacks, and that would be the average change in terms of actual dollars. And you see for one family, on average, they're up about $500 for the year. Two family, up about $850. Three family, $943 approximately. And for the four family, $1,347 is the average change. The next slide gets into this same sort of data, but looks at it from a different perspective in terms of addresses. So what we have here are sample tax impacts for different assessment neighborhoods. And you will see the annex, Beaver Hills, see it twice, City Point, East Rock, Fairhaven North and South, Morris Cove, Prospect Hill, Riverview, South Hill, and Westville proper. And this just kind of allows you to see what the tax change, including last year's phase-in exemption, would be. So you're really looking at not some hypothetical, what is your property worth, but actually what are you paying in taxes versus what you were paying in taxes this past tax cycle. And I believe that is the end of the grand list portion of this presentation.
We're going to pause at this point because everything up to this point has been about, after the initial slides around overview and around the capital, everything here has been about revenue. And the next slide gets us into expenditure. And so let's take a pause because particularly if colleagues have questions for Mr. Pullen, because this is a good moment to ask those questions and then he can be excused to go on with his day. So particularly if there are questions of Mr. Pullen about the grand list, about the phase-in, about the information we were just given. Alder Morrison and then Alder Frill.
Okay. So I just was wondering, I saw that the tax exempt, that number is really high. It used to be like 52% of our property or city property was tax exempt, and now it's over 55%. And so, can you just explain to me, how did we go from there to there? What is impacting that is making our exempt land increased? How?
Well, there's two things at play here. One is that you gotta make sure we're comparing apples to apples, because a lot of the time when we talk about the exempt grand list versus the taxable grand list, we're talking about the entire list. So we're comparing motor vehicle, personal property, and real estate, that number as a whole, against the exempt grand list, which is just real estate. So you'll see that it's a higher percentage when we're comparing just the amount of exempt real estate versus the amount of taxable real estate. So that's where you're looking at 55% instead of, closer to 52% when you're looking at it as a whole. In terms of what's driving the growth of the exempt grand list, part of that is in 2021, we had a revaluation. So everything in the city went up. The value of pretty much every class of property was increased. Typically, when the exempt grand list increases, it's because Yale is building. They like to build things to the gold standard, and they spend a lot of money when they build. And that increases the grand list, with them being, a $9.9 billion grand list. Yale University has $4.3 billion worth of property. So they're typically the ones who are driving the exempt grand list growth.
Right. Okay, yeah, that caught my eye. All very helpful to see that, because we always talk about 52%, but then to see over 55, but that makes sense. The larger list. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Alder Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a follow-up. Alder Morris and I are kind of tag teaming on this. With this 0.9 billion, and thank you, first of all, for your presentation. Very thorough. The all others, would you say this is new construction, or is this also part of the assessed value going forward? Well, let me rephrase the question. Are there a lot of new buildings outside of Yale that are being added to the exempt grand list?
No, not typically.
Okay.
And a lot of the times, it's not even Yale making new buildings so much as you can look at the construction building permits, they just build a lot, even refurbishing or, building upon centers that they already have and upgrading them.
So I have noticed a lot of new churches in New Haven have come online. And I'm wondering how many of those are actually applying for tax exemption, because some of them are storefronts. And so I would imagine just part of the building would be tax exempt. And whether your office keeps track of those kind of exemptions.
We do. We review them all. Churches have their own specific exempt code. And while they don't follow the same sort of quadrennial reapplication rules as the other exempt properties, they have to let us know that it's a house of worship. So they typically have to come in, they have to prove to us that they're actually having services. They, sometimes we'll even go out and just check it out to make sure that it's an actual church. Especially if it's in a residential area or somewhere where it's not supposed to be a church, then we're not just gonna necessarily take your word for it. We need to see you're actually having services. So I can take a look at churches themselves and let you know what the values are year by year, because I have both the grand lists here. So
I would love that information through you, Mr. Chair. I think that'll be
duly noted.
Helpful. And that's all I have. Once again, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, Alder Farrell. Next, we have Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. There was a lot of useful information here. I'm looking particularly at the apartments are up 7.17%. Can you go into a little specifics with that? Is that new apartments without abatements, or does that include some coming off of, tax deferrals? What percentage?
When I looked into this earlier today, it's mostly new things that are being built. Most of which will probably have assessment deferrals. I can look at exactly what is coming off, but there are a lot of new apartments that are being built. So that's what's primarily driving that.
Like apartments being built or apartments that are built?
I mean, there's both. There's apartments that are coming off of deferrals, and there's also new deferrals that are coming on.
Right, so out of that 7%, which ones are coming off of deferral?
I wouldn't know exactly off the top of my head. I could get you a list
Or
of
the
all
amount,
deferrals
just
if you
the
want to
amount.
look at them, but that's not something that I can memorize over.
No, actually, I was just looking at the total amount more than, which properties, and the total amount of the apartments that are in deferral and the difference that maybe if they were to pay the full amount, what that would be versus the deferral amount, if that makes sense.
That is not something that we could easily put together because a lot of these properties are not complete. So we're not going to know what the completed value is. We would just know what the base value is. But what I can do is I can get you a list of the deferral properties, and we can see how much of the increase from 21 to 22 is a result of these deferral properties that have gone from either year 2 to year 3 or year 3 to year 4, where the exemption shrinks.
Yeah.
And for those, a lot of them may be completed already.
Yeah, and we kind of know what the value is and what the deferral plans are due to the number of apartments. So some of that info could be.
Yes, for some of them, we will have the completed full 100% amounts. In order to exempt it, we need to know how much we're exempting. So I can get you that information.
Thank you. And,
You would like to make that request to the chair?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I was just
So
going to. Thank you. And, you meant, obviously, things come off the grant list, things get added to the grant list. Are there any big items that you could think of that have come off and what has come on? I mean, obviously it grew, but there's so much that goes into this.
There is. I've worked on it all year long, so I can tell you.
It's more complicated than what is presented to us. We get the general gist, but then there's all the stuff in between that.
The grant list is a moving target.
Yeah.
You have everyday construction that is coming on. You have court appeals that are settled. You have Board of Assessment appeals that are brought upon annually. So some of the reduction, if you look, real property is up not even 1%, almost 1%. And that increase would primarily be due to new construction because you have some Board of Assessment appeals that have been granted that would result in reductions. And you have some court appeal settlements that have already been entered. Not too many because we're only in the first year of the revaluation, but we've gotten over 1,500 appeals in the first year. So, I'm currently dealing with negotiating settlements with all of those in court now for all of the 1,500 that bothered to take it to the next level, which would be filing appeals at Superior Court. And we've got a lot, but that's typical in any year where you have a revaluation where things increase citywide.
And is a certain percentage of that reflected in these numbers, or these numbers will be updated once those appeals have been settled?
Mike, that is probably a better question for you because I don't know if you put those assumptions in there. I know you have them.
So what we do when we calculate the tax budget, we take the overall net taxable grant list, but we also make assumptions. So the $9 billion, that's not what the actual tax budget is built off of. We take a look at the levy over the last few years, the losses on the levy. What could be possibly lost during the year, of course, is a guesstimate, right? It's based off of past stuff. Any one large item or small item or non-large item can affect that loss. But we do take a look at when we're building the overall tax budget, and we do take assumptions on the loss and what we think we're gonna see in value.
So assumptions are built in.
Yes.
There's
Thank
nothing
you.
to these numbers that you see here.
In our presentation or your?
They're not in the presentation shows the overall number,
Okay.
but again, when we arrive at the tax budget, those losses are built in.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Further questions, particularly of Mr. Pullen, before we excuse him for the evening? I have a quick follow-up question. It goes back to the Yale University issue. I believe in recent years we've discussed this, and the question I posed in years past was, is the Yale aggregate value of their exempt property because of their buying land and building new buildings, or is it because they're just developing and redeveloping on the land that they already own? And I believe the answer was the latter. And is that still the case?
It is. Every year I get a letter in the fall from Yale, basically explaining properties that have changed from academic use, that are no longer academic use, or properties that were previously taxable and are now exempt. And I don't recall getting a lot of taxable to exempt changes.
Mm-hmm.
There was one year where we had a couple big ones, but since then it has leveled out, and it's mainly just been building and rehabbing and expanding upon properties that they already have.
So the university's footprint in terms of acreage is fairly stable. It's just that they keep building and rebuilding on top of that acreage, and the value keeps going up and up and up.
Correct.
Great. Further questions for Mr. Pullen, Alder Festa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one more. My colleague just pointed out Yale, but I want to also note that the state has $1 billion worth of property, and we're supposed to get a certain amount per dollar on that money. I just want to have that on the record, because $1 billion is a lot of money, and I get it. It's the schools and some properties as well that they have here in the city, but $1 billion is a lot, and we don't get really we get some compensation for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess it wasn't really.
That was a comment. Further questions for Mr. Pullen in particular? Last call before we let him leave for the evening. Seeing none, thank you very much, sir. We appreciate your report.
Thank you, guys.
And we'll let you go. Now, before we move on to the expenditure side of the budget, do colleagues have questions for Mr. Gormley around the ARPA reallocations, around the capital budget, and around the revenue portion of the budget? Before we go to expenditures, let's take a pause and see if there's any questions for Mr. Gormley on those topics that we've already gone through. The ARPA reallocations, the capital budget, the revenue assumptions, building permits, staying level, parking tickets, what, you want to kick the tires on any of these assumptions? Now is the time, folks. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for your presentation, Mr. Gormley, and I look forward to looking at all those lovely charts you printed out for us. Just not tonight. First question is this 2-year capital budget plan working out, and what challenges have you faced, if any?
To be quite frank, we haven't really faced any challenges with the 2-year budget cycle. I think it works out because it gives city departments, it forces them to plan for a longer period of time. I think we've had mechanisms in place to manage the 2-year funding, so that way departments are not spending, $10 million all at once. So I think the 2-year budget, since we implemented it in the 2019-20 budget cycle has really worked out for the city. I think we've certainly reduced our costs, and we've actually been able to take advantage of some of the markets with the bonding as well, that if we would have did it year by year, may not have gotten a favorable interest rate on the actual borrowing. So far it's worked out to our advantage.
Okay. Then, I did notice that you mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I heard it correctly, you're using some ARPA funds towards that capital budget. Now this is coming from me. You all know how fiscally, challenging I am. Why aren't we using that ARPA fund for something else versus the capital? It's $5 million difference, or approximately $5 million. Why not use the ARPA instead of to set off that capital budget, use it for something else for, to go towards, parks, to go towards, sidewalks, if we use it for that, or other more tangible things as well, because we're borrowing anyway. What difference, I guess, does that $5 million make?
So let me explain it this way. I think that what we're doing is we're taking previously approved projects, right? And we're reallocating it towards other projects. So some of the stuff you just mentioned, if you look on slide number 10, that $6.3 million is being reallocated towards sidewalks, the Longworth Park project, general park improvements, commercial industrial sites, some neighborhood improvements. The reallocation of ARPA funds is, we have this one-time opportunity to do these type of projects, these infrastructure projects. If we can utilize ARPA funds while also lowering our debt service going into the future, I think that's the prudent thing to do. And again, these were previously approved projects where there's lapsed funding going into ARPA. So we're not saying the current ARPA balance is 10.7 million that's left. We're not saying let's take 6 million from the current balance. We really did do our due diligence and look at previously approved projects. But to your point, it's helping us offset, even if it is for this 2-year cycle, and who knows what happens in another 2 years, we're still lowering our borrowing costs and still improving certain projects that you just mentioned.
Before you continue with your questions, Alder Festa, I think a point of clarification may be useful here, because I think there were 2 points in which you mentioned ARPA funds. One is here on page 10, which is reallocation of 6.3 million towards other projects that are very concrete and tangible in nature, including Longworth Park and radios and sidewalks and such. But then there's the $5 million in budgetary relief, to lack of a better term, that was budgeted for this year that you project we won't use. So you're just rolling that over. So those are 2 different ARPA monies that you're talking about.
Correct.
Right. And I'm not talking about the 5 million that's being rolled over. I'm talking about the one that we're applying towards the capital budget. And I get, what are the savings from bonding? Do you have that number?
I don't have that number, just because it depends on what happens in the market, right? We talk to our financial advisors. Unfortunately, I think the market right now is unpredictable. So they given me a number, and know why? They came back 2 days later and said, well, you might need to increase that by 70 basis points. So it's like, trying to predict the savings right now is a little tough, just because we don't know. We normally go out to borrow in between September and November, depending on the market. So it's a little tough to predict the savings, but again, we have these funds right now to be used for this opportunity, and if we can use it to reduce our costs, even if it's, $1 million, I think that will save us in the long run.
Okay, is there any plan to use any of that funding for environmental purposes?
I mean, that's a discussion that we can have with, I can have with the administration, you know, with the leftover funds. Right now, the way that we have it written is really the reallocation. Our funds are going towards those capital projects on slide 10. That's kind of when we looked at the capital budget and we looked at the treasury guidelines, those are the ones that were most eligible to be used for ARPA. Some of them is very specifically mentioned in the US Treasury guidelines. So as far as climate, we did approve a $5 million as part of the last allocation. So, you know, we have until December of 2024 to reallocate any unused funds or look at the balance. So I think that's a conversation as we look at what we're going to do with the remaining funds for ARPA.
Because as you can imagine, being the chair of CSEP, I get a lot of emails regarding electrification, what we're doing with our buildings, our schools, et cetera, with making them more environmentally and climate friendly. So just food for thought in that regard. And I didn't see really anything. I see rolling stock, which could entail EVs, but you know, it's obviously the.
And I think that's probably more of a conversation when we come back during that May 8th date, as the city gives a deeper dive into what we've done with ARPA.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Further questions of Mr. Gormany on capital overview, on ARPA overview, on revenue overview for this budget? You feel confident, Mr. Gormany, that, or the building official feels confident we're going to get $15 million in building permits?
Yes, this was a conversation we had with the Economic Development Administrator in working with his Department of Building. I know there was a transition between Mr. Tercio leaving and currently having an acting building official, but yes, we are confident at the moment with 15 million in the budget.
Apartment buildings going up in various places. We have the bed replacement neuroscience facility that Yale New Haven's doing over on the Hospital Center Greenfields campus. Those are some big projects that may have some impact this year.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Last thing for me, before we move on to the expenditure side, is in reference to your page 10, which shows the projects, the ARPA projects that would have monies taken from them and reallocated elsewhere. Thank you for that information, I appreciate it. But I think as a follow-up, I would like to see how those 4 bullets on page 10 relate to the full list on page 13. Right, those 4 bullets come from the bucket, some of those buckets. This is not something you have to do right now.
Yep.
But I would like to see that, you know, because those 13 is the full bucket list, so to speak. Whereas those 4 bullets are some items that probably fall within some of those buckets.
Absolutely correct. That could be certainly useful.
Thank you so much. Any further questions for Mr. Gormany before we move on with the expenditure side of our general fund budget? Seeing none, Mr. Gormany.
All right, thank you. Only a few more slides to go, so I will start on slide 33. Again, this is just the pie chart of the expenditures and how it's broken down between categories such as debt service, pensions, employee benefits, education. But these are the various categories that departments fall under. So this kind of just shows where a bulk of the funding is going. Again, education, while it's large as part of the pie chart here, I always like to remind that out of the 203.3 million, a portion of that is being reimbursed by education cost sharing. And there is a slide in this deck that shows that as we get into it. Moving on to slide 34, I'm going to just go over some of the personnel changes related to the fiscal year 2023-24 budget. There was an increase that was submitted, for the Board of Alder stipend that goes from $2,000 to $5,000, and for the president from $2,400 to $6,250. Executive management, we did increase, as we've talked about. Executive management handbook is being worked on and finalized, and will be submitted to the board. We talked in the past about some of the executive management salaries, the increases, making them comparable to market. And just like what you hear with the union contracts, also recruitment and retention for some of these executive management positions as well. So the increases were submitted as part of the 2023-2024 budget for executive management. The city did add a net of 34 positions to this 2023-2024 budget. I say a net of 34 because if you add it up in the budget, it's really 36, but 2 are being reimbursed by the Board of Education, and that is because of where they fall. Per the city charter, there is a position in the Board of Education that we are looking at for a labor relations staff attorney. But all attorneys have to fall in court counsel, which is why you see the position listed in the budget, but a full reimbursement on base salary from the Board of Education, as well as a deputy purchasing agent, which is the same thing. The city has one purchasing office, which works in conjunction with the city and Board of Education. So that has to be a city position, but it will ultimately work for the Board of Education on purchasing matters, but the salary will be fully reimbursed by the Board of Education. Again, we have this structure in place, for the last few years. We did that with the attorney that works in the Board of Education, but is paid out of Corporation Counsel. So again, it's just where the position lies in the office for the reason it's listed on the city side. There was really a primary focus on public safety, parks, recreation, and youth, and you can see based on the positions that were listed as new positions. We had a 911 communication supervisor, operator, dispatcher. We had some sworn personnel in the police department, a crime analyst. As part of the ARPA funding, we did increase the intel room. We did some renovations as part of the camera project we talked about when that was approved. And that's primarily what this crime analyst is going to be looking at and working with is the intel room. The police department will give more information on that particular position as well as the sworn positions. 2 municipal animal control officers. On the fire side, we did submit 3 captains and a lieutenant in this budget as well. We did increase the youth seasonal and parks and public works seasonal. We increased the youth seasonal for more capacity, especially during the summertime with the part-time workers. And parks and public works, we did look at to increase the hiring and capacity for the seasonals in there as well. Focusing in on parks as well, we did add a parks 4-person, 2 caretakers, and 2 caretaker 3s. And for programming and youth, which is on the recreation side, 2 park rangers. Now, we did look at revenue generating positions as well within this budget. So what you'll see on this slide are a few of the positions listed out. The health department, we added a senior sanitarian, which really does a lot of the inspections for the health department and generates revenue. We also, one of the new initiatives, we looked at our part-time inspectors in our building department. This is a concept that in researching, a few other municipalities have actually gone to is looking at part-time building inspectors to supplement some of the work, especially as we continue to have an economic boom going on in New Haven, a lot of economic development going on. We'll need those part-time inspectors to help supplement the full-time work as well. And again, that's what helps us generate the building permit revenue that we receive as well, within the city. We did reclassify a few positions and added in some positions to help streamline city operations as well. Again, I mentioned the deputy purchasing agent. Besides the Board of Education, we did add one on the city side as well, to help implement a lot of purchasing, to help with the implementation of purchasing projects. We did add a few positions in position in transportation, traffic, and parking, and the Commission on Equal Opportunity. I'm not going to go through everything. There's actually an appendix in the back at the end of the PowerPoint that actually lists out all the positions with their salaries as well. So the next slide really just shows the position count. Again, this would bring, when you compare full-time plus dollar positions from the budgeted positions on the city side only to 1,454 positions. I mean, the truth of the matter is we want to provide services and other areas to the city. We need those bodies in order to do that. So I think the mayor's 2023-2024 budget incorporated some of those principles, especially in youth, parks, and public works. Looking at some of the departmental changes, from a city organization standpoint, there are two things. The reporting structure for the library has changed from the chief administrative officer to the community services administrator. All this is really just a move of the coordinator that the library reports to. The library performs a lot of community functions in working with youth, elderly. The health department really acts as a community hub. So the mayor felt that organizationally, it can work with community services in a greater capacity. So again, not changing the functions, but really just changing the organizational reporting structure for the library, going from CAO Rush Kittle to Dr. DeWall. The budget also creates an Office of Policy Management and Grants. This is really at no cost to the taxpayers. The Office of Management and Budget has really been an extension of the mayor's office. So what this does is kind of extract out management and budget from the Department of Finance, as well as a few other divisions, which is really overseen by the budget director. And it really works on financial policy and reporting, which are some of the functions that we already oversee and do. But what we're also looking at is centralizing the grants for the city as well, which is why you see that extension at the end of grants. That's one of the functions that we've been looking at for a while, is sort of centralizing the grant process, grant reporting, and other reports. Again, this is a concept that is known. The state of Connecticut has an Office of Policy and Management, Hartford, Bridgeport. Again, we're just separating out a few divisions that were normally under finance and kind of making it its own agency there. Moving on to the overall numbers in the budget, looking at fixed costs that of late equates to 42.36% of the budget. So fixed costs are really utilities, debt service, and benefits. And then you have those other costs, such as salary increases, and things like that are not included. But when you look at utilities, debt service, and employee benefits, which is pensions, insurance, general service, liability insurances, and so on, that's 42.36% of the budget. Looking at overtime, we did increase police by $1 million, and we did increase fire by $900,000. We still are working on the Sunday hours with the two unions, so that's ongoing negotiations, but we did increase part of the library allocation within the budget. And we did increase the Dixwell Q House funding, Democracy Fund, we increased based on the current election cycle that's going on. We did see to increase that budget by about 150,000 as well. Moving on to slide 37, we did increase contract reserve, which is the funding that we have set aside for union negotiations. As you see, we are actively negotiating contracts. To be quite frank, we had one person in the Office of Labor Relations for quite a while. So negotiating 6 contracts is a lot during that time period. We just hired someone a few months ago, which is one of the staff attorneys, so that has certainly helped. But, you know, we want to get contracts settled, you know, with the unions. So, but what we did do was, just in case this does go into next fiscal year, we did add $700,000 into the reserve account. Debt service, we've seen an increase, and the Board of Education, we increased that budget by $8 million going into next fiscal year based on the fixed cost increase, the teachers' contracts, you know, are going to see salary increases. They have a few contracts that they're increasing as well. So that was one of the larger increases as well within this budget. Just trying to see if I missed anything. And moving on to the next slide is really pensions. That's really the last item I want to talk about from the expenditure side. This budget does reduce the investment rate of return from 7.25% to 6.90%. So this is approximately where the state is currently at with their investment rate of return in some of the larger municipalities based on our report that we got from Hooker and Holcomb when they made a presentation to the 2 pension boards. So both pension boards did land on 6.90 as far as our investment rate of return. This also does continue with the plan of the closed amortization table, which is a very important part when you're looking at pension liabilities. You want to keep that table closed. Think about it as if you kept refinancing your house from year to year to year to year, starting the period, the 30-year period all over. You don't want to do that. You want to keep going with the payments until you get to year 0. Keeping a closed amortization table is very important when you're looking at pension liabilities, and that's what we've done. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I believe we're in year 22 or 21 of the closed amortization table. So what this chart shows you is the Hooker and Holcomb ADEC payment for both SURF and PNF. Got kind of smushed together there, but what you can see is for SURF, they recommended 26.40 as the ADEC contribution, and for PNF as 55.5 million. What you will see is we continued the practice. The last 2 fiscal years, we've actually contributed more than what Hooker and Holcomb has recommended as far as the ADEC. So we did increase as part of fiscal year 24 budget each pension fund by about $400,000 above what they recommended for the ADEC. So again, this budget does include continuing that practice from the administration standpoint. Moving on to slide, and somehow it did not get numbered. But basically, there is a slide towards the end called Next Steps, which really just kind of outlines where we're at, which is this budget presentation, and then we have the budgetary workshops where I will be with the department heads to justify what they're looking for within their budget. The mayor is also giving some town hall meetings, which are listed there on the PowerPoint as well at 3 schools. So again, again, obviously, there's a caveat, all of these dates are subject to change. Just want to put that out there. And then the next few slides are the appendix of the positions that I talked about earlier. I know that's a lot, but again, we have the budgetary workshops. I think we'll certainly get a lot of information or questions answered by the department heads at those workshops as well. So, Mr. Chair, with that being said, I believe that is all I have as the overview.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gormley, as always, for your hard work and your dedication. We appreciate the presentation. And just want to remind colleagues that deep dives into departmental budgets will happen in those workshops we're having in the weeks ahead. When we have coordinators and department heads coming to us to talk about their departmental and divisional budget proposals. But if you have questions for Mr. Gormley, kind of at a 30,000 foot level, now's a good time to ask them questions about the expenditure portion of the mayor's proposed general fund budget for next fiscal year. I see Alder Morrison and then Alder Phillip.
Yes, Mr. Gorman, my only question is in regards to the plan that you guys are creating to increase the salaries of those different top level staff people. During the course of the budget process, are you bringing that actual plan, or is this still something that you guys are trying to figure out what you want to get an okay from the board to go forward with the plans such as the one that you outlined?
No, that's a great question, Alder Morrison. I think, as I mentioned during the presentation, working in conjunction with the budget is also the executive management manual, which outlines a lot of the salaries, the salary scale, and a lot of the other working conditions for executive management employees. That should be submitted to the board fairly soon. But that's kind of the basis of what we used to project out the salaries within this budget. We looked at comparisons of other cities and towns our size as well, and looked at where are we at in comparison to the different salary scales. So I think that's going to work in conjunction with the budget. So that way this board can hear more about how we got there, as well as looking at the budget from an overall standpoint as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing, you're not going to bring a certain amount, for example, you're not going to bring a certain amount like the head librarian gets X. You will just more so talk to us about the way in which these numbers are calculated, or will there be a bottom line number?
Well, I think that's it's kind of twofold, right? It's kind of, the numbers are already in the budget, right? So when you vote on the budget, you're voting on those particular numbers. But I think to see how we arrived at those numbers, that's the executive management plan that you have to see. And I think that's what I mean by working in conjunction with the budget, because we have to submit a budget by March 1st, right? So that's kind of, the executive management manual is working in conjunction with this. So I think those numbers are incorporated, but you're going to see how we arrived at those numbers for those particular positions, and looking at different areas like I mentioned.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Morrison, Alder Fairlawn, and then Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Gormley, for, again, your presentation. I do see the proposed increase for the position changes, and I think I saw it somewhere else. But I don't see in this the increase for the city town clerk. And I'm thinking that the registrar remains the same in this budget. I think I saw that elsewhere, but I don't see it in this presentation.
So I do not believe that is listed on the appendix, but when you look in the actual budget book itself, the city town, So one of the proposals was to bring the registrar of voters up to 81,000, and the city town clerk up to the same amount of the registrar of voters. So that may have just been accidentally omitted from here. We can certainly add it on to the version that I will post on the OMB website, but that was accounted for within the actual budget itself.
Yeah, I do remember seeing that. I just wanted to point that out because since the auditors are in here, we're not the only ones that have a.
Duly noted.
Thank you, Mr. Gorman. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Furlow, for making that very important point. Moving on to Alder Festa, and any other alder who wishes to ask questions, please indicate so by raising your hand. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just going to go back to pensions and the rate going down to the 6.90. I know you said that that's where the state is, but if we were to take away the state and just focus on us, is that still enough compared to where the market is?
Through the chair, I can get you the presentation that we had. Hooker and Holcomb, who's our actuary, said that's right in line with a lot of the other larger Connecticut municipalities, which I believe is around 6.80 to 6.90. I will certainly get you that information. But this was, moving to 6.90 was a favorable recommendation by both pension boards and listening to the pension board's financial advisors. They also thought that it was a prudent move to 6.90 as well.
And I was just going to ask you that, if they were referred. And through you, Mr. Chair, if we could get that information, it would be helpful.
Duly noted.
Thank you. Also, you mentioned the Board of Ed is going to be reimbursing us for 2 positions, but they've also asked for $8 million in the budget. So technically, I mean, we're going to still be paying for it like we do many other things. I guess, is it just a wash? Is it just something that needs to be mentioned, even though, you know, how are they going to pay for it when they're in debt?
Well, this is the city charter of, you know, the Board of Education is, you know, the city ordinances and charter considers the Board of Education a department of the city. So whenever they run a deficit, it's our deficit anyways, right? So again, I think if these were not a purchasing position and a attorney position, these would just be budgeted on their side. Now, again, 8 million is, you know, what they need, and I think that it's really finding that balancing act that we have to look at. There are positions that are needed within the Board of Ed. They have labor contracts, they spend money on outside counsel. You know, looking at this way, it's cheaper to have this position. We're looking on the purchasing side as we were looking at revamping the city purchasing piece. That also includes the Board of Education. So I get what you're saying. We're giving them 8 million, but then, you know, they're reimbursing us out of this 8 million. What's the difference with the wash? But
I just had to mention that because it was mentioned that the Board of Ed will be paying for those 2 positions.
But again, I think also we have to look at it from a compliance piece as well.
I got you. So, yeah. Also, and I don't know where I saw this, probably in another document that I don't see here, the controller. There was something that said it would be part of the Office of Policy Management and Grants. Did I see that somewhere?
Not in any of my documents.
Okay, good. I'm happy to hear that. Because I don't know where I saw something, but I was concerned about that. But it's a non-issue. Let's see, sorry. And also, I'm assuming in these charts, there is one with our debt service payments. Because I remember last year you gave us a document that listed, not in a chart, it was actually listed like year by year, how much we had to pay to debt services. And I'm assuming, I didn't look through this, so I'm assuming you have something in here that's similar?
So
Oh, there it is.
page
Okay.
43 will show you the overall debt payments. I think what you're referring to is there's two sections of what you're referring to. Within the budget book itself, in section 1, which lists out financial procedures, there is a chart that kind of shows the debt service moving forward. But, you know, as I always caveat, that is without us borrowing this coming budget cycle, right? So that's based on the previous borrowing. And that's updated when we borrow, and then it's also on the 106 form as well that this board gets.
Okay, yeah, because the chart just goes to 2024. I think what you gave us last year went through the whole however many years.
Yep, that's within the body of the budget book.
Okay, so it is in there. I'm still on page 10. I think you did go through, I have here a little note that says out of the 34 new positions, obviously there's 36, but you already mentioned the other two. How many are just title changes? But I think you did go through that versus increase in personnel. Also, vacancies. I mean, there's all these positions being in this budget. We have really a lot of vacancies. Was it discussed to take some of those vacancies out to apply towards some of these positions?
We did look at that from a position standpoint, but looking at the services that are needed, I think we looked at adding the additional positions was more prudent to look at. We looked at adding the positions and not really trimming the vacancies, because the vacancies are really what's needed now as well. So again, as we settle union contracts and things like that, we're hoping that we can start to hire these vacancies as well. And our HR director is certainly, she's come on board the last few months. She's certainly looking at all the processes, including civil service. And again, we've seen that come to fruit with, you know, on the action reports, you've seen hirings going on the action reports, not just promotions or things like that. So, you know, she's taking a deep dive into that. But we did look at vacancies. And to be quite frank, we felt that, you know, the vacancies were needed to continue the services, and then the new positions were needed to advance some of the services, such as in our parks, and streamlining some of the operations.
Okay, I guess I'll look forward to hearing those presentations once we get to them. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Costa. Further questions? Alder Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Gorman, talk a little bit about the building department. I heard of part-time staffing. With all the construction and everything going on in our city, are they staffed up enough? I mean, you're part-time. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, we are looking at currently, again, as part of Alder Festa's question as well, looking at the vacancies. And, you know, we have a tracking committee that prioritizes which vacancies, especially revenue generating ones like the building departments, the qualifications, things like that. So that's one of the things that we're looking at right now are the building vacancies. And I think these part-time positions will certainly help supplement once we hire the few full-time positions that are left. Right now they have 4 vacancies, 4 full-time vacancies within their department that HR is working on. But again, I think one of the things we have to do is we have to make sure during development season and buildings going up and things like that, we have enough inspectors to inspect these buildings and make sure the permits are accurate and correct. So I think these part-time positions will certainly help supplement that work within the building department.
So should I be waiting until they come?
Yeah, I think they can probably answer that more in depth, on how these will help supplement those full-time positions once they're hired. But I can tell you, especially with the increased volume that they see, they definitely are looking at more inspectors. And I think going the part-time route, which again is something that, Mr. Tercio was looking at prior to his departure. And he actually recommended that we go the part-time route as well, based on him talking to other municipalities.
I have some questions about public parks and public works, but I'll wait till the department comes. All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Alder Hamilton. Further questions of Mr. Gormley on the expenditure side of the budget? Seeing none, we would like to thank you, Mr. Gormley, for your presentation this evening. And before we adjourn,
All right, thank you.
you're excused. Thank you very much. Before we adjourn, I just would like to remind colleagues of our schedule going forward. Everybody should have received a copy of the full workshop list, which continues this Thursday with our public hearing, our first public hearing on the budget. And then the first group of departmental workshops, including the Board of Alders, the Mayor's Office, Corporation Council, Department of Finance, Office of Policy and Grants, Finance, other departments, the Assessor's Office, City Town Clerk, where we'll hear more, Fair Rent Commission, and persons with disabilities. We had a lot of business items coming into finance that needed to be dealt with, more than we were going to be able to do just tonight. And so we actually have business items that we're doing on Thursday as well. So this will be quite an evening. 3 requests to increase the maximum expenditure for legal services agreements with law firms that do work on behalf of the city. You've heard the names of these law firms before. I figured it made sense to have them come before us this Thursday, since the Corporation Council will be here anyway. And so in addition to the public hearing number 1 and those departmental budget workshops, we have 3 legal service agreement items that need to be dealt with as regular business items. And then the next meeting that we have is March 29th, a Wednesday. Public hearing on the budget number 2. And then we'll be hearing from police services, fire service, and community resilience. We have 1 business item to do that night as well, which is a transfer request from the police services department, moving money from salary account into overtime, equipment, and other accounts. I figured since they have this request, it made sense for them to talk about that request the evening they would be here anyway for their departmental workshop. So for these next 2 budget meetings, we actually have business items to do as well. One more quick announcement before a motion to adjourn is appropriate. As you heard from Mr. Gormley, the administration is proposing to move the public library, the New Haven Public Library, out from the community administrative, the chief administrator officer portfolio and into the community services administration. And so the administration has also requested that we move the public library presentation from Thursday, the 30th to April the 10th, so that the library would be heard along with community services, elderly services, and the other departments that are part of the CSA. So that will be a slight change in our workshop schedule based on the departmental realignment. So those are my public service announcements. Next meeting is in 2 days, 3 days. Thursday, however many days it is from now, that's when it is. And we look forward to seeing you there. Alder Nicola.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion to adjourn? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Thank you.